The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
What's up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to Deck Talk Podcast. We got a pretty good episode coming on here tonight. It is just going to be Deck Talk Podcast chat with Norman and Colin tonight. But I'm Colin Burnett.
And I am Norman Lee. Man, what is going on, everybody? Glad to see everybody's back for another episode of the Deck Talk Podcast. You know, we haven't done one of these chat with Norman Lee's in a while. We've had pretty much a guest on every week here for the past month and a half, 2 months, man. But it's going to be good just to sit back and talk fishing again with some of our viewers, man, isn't it?
Oh, man, it is going to be great. I've been looking forward to it. What's up, Dennis? Dennis
What's going on, Mr. Dennis
Crenshaw?
Crenshaw?
What's up, my brothers, Norman?
Yeah, me and Dennis talked earlier today on the phone, and Dennis was saying how much rain they're getting down there in South Florida. He's actually scared to be booking guide trips right now because he has to cancel all of them because it's raining and pouring and storming so hard. It seems like he said every day down there now, down in Florida for the past several weeks. But
well, that's the reason why he was on last week too.
Yeah, exactly, man. And Colin, we're gonna get this thing started real quick, but something really crazy, and I'm sure you've thought about it, and I was thinking about this morning. And usually at the end of every episode, we usually talk a little bit about this, how fast time flies, and it seems like when you're doing what you love to do, and we're talking fishing. At the end of every episode, we're like, man, an hour's already gone by. Where did that hour go to?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're just having a blast talking. But what's really crazy is this here episode is our 19th episode of the Deck Talk Podcast, going into our 4th month. But what's crazy to me is how fast everything's taken off with the podcast, man. But I guess what I'm getting at is we want to, I don't think we would have made it through our first month if it wasn't for all of our viewers out there, everybody that's out there that supports us, supports the Deck Talk Podcast, because what we do here is a reflection on all of you supporting us and supporting this podcast, watching us, viewing us, subscribing to our Deck Talk Podcast channel on YouTube. Getting on and interacting with us, asking all kinds of questions, and some of the questions you guys have is just the best questions I think there is that you guys are coming up with, whether it be directed to me and myself or Colin, or our great guests that we've had on the show so far up to this point. But that's crazy to me is that these 4 months, man, has just flown by. But yeah, but we wanted to get on first of all and thank everybody, man, because if it wasn't for you guys supporting the Deck Talk Podcast and viewing and watching us, and here's another thing that's crazy is when me and you first started, planning on doing a podcast, we wanted to do a podcast that was a little bit different. There's quite a few fishing podcasts out there, but we wanted to do one that was a little bit different. There's not a lot of fishing podcasts that's actually interactive, where as we're live, we could be talking to our viewers. They could ask us all kinds of questions as it's actually going on. And, we done our research, and there's not a lot of other podcasts out there that actually interacts with their viewers as they're doing it.
I think we're the only one.
Yep.
That does it and have guests.
Yep.
We've got Flute Master Gene, which is a buddy of ours. He does what he calls Friday Night Lights, and Alex Rudd does one on Fridays also. That it is interactive, but mainly Alex is just he's got other guests, but he does them live. But it's every now and then he'll answer questions and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Gene, he answers a lot of questions, but he doesn't have. It's rarely that he has any like a guest on, like how we
Yeah.
do. So we are one of a kind, Norman.
Yep, and again, it's a reflection of everybody out there, all you guys that actually makes this thing tick, and we appreciate everybody out there for that. But
Yeah. So
anyway, that's enough.
hold
That
on.
what's it? Go ahead.
We got Lori's on. She says, "Hey guys, listen from Ohio." So hey, Lori.
What's up,
Uh,
Lori?
that you're on, and we got Aaron Vincent, got Matt Kocher, and old Jonathan's on here. Jonathan already asked what's for dinner. I don't know yet. We haven't got that far.
Believe me, I have.
Oh, you have?
This is actually
Lucky
the
dog.
first. This is actually the first Thursday that I actually was able to sit down and eat something prior to jumping on our podcast. And usually I don't get a chance to eat till about 8 o'clock tonight.
That's
But
how I'm going
oh
to.
yeah, my wife cooked up some great old spaghetti piled with meat sauce, plenty of spaghetti sauce. That meat in it was just off the charts. And if you think I'm trying to make you jealous, Colin, that's what I'm trying to do right now because nobody likes to eat more than Colin, and he hasn't ate yet, so I'm gonna rub it in a little bit. But it was good. But thanks to my wife for hooking me up before we started tonight, so I didn't have to. I'm not eating at like 9 o'clock at night tonight, so that was
Yeah,
awesome of her.
that's
But
awesome.
anyway,
Good. We also, Norman, want to say thanks to uh, say thanks to our viewers, but we also want to say thanks to all the guests that we've had already.
yes,
But we also want to say thanks for the companies that have come on and sponsored us
yeah,
through the podcast already,
yeah.
um, and the ones that's coming here in the future too. So,
Exactly. And if it wasn't for the people that help support us, whether it be and support support Deck Talk podcast, whether it be our great viewers we have out there or the companies that want to support us as well, man. This wouldn't be able to happen without everybody out there that really makes us tick and makes this thing tick.
exactly,
But,
exactly.
well,
So,
you know what?
Aaron Vincent did say, "What's up, brother?" He says, "What's hot on Nickajack right now, Aaron? We are fixing to get to that." So,
We're about to dive into that, aren't we, Colin? And okay, Aaron Vincent just led us into our first topic of the night. Thanks, Aaron. He didn't know he was leading us into the topic, but Aaron's leading us right in there. You know what? Let's talk a little bit about what's going on locally. Uh, Colin, has you've been spending quite a bit of time here lately on Chickamauga, haven't you? And the pictures are just killing me. You've been sending me some pictures when I'm sitting here at the house, not on the water, and but you've been tearing it up out there on Chick.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on and what they're chewing on out there right now.
All right. On Chickamauga, um, what I have noticed, this is the best time. Probably the next 3 weeks is going to be the best time to be out on Chickamauga. I guarantee you that the biggest bags are going to be caught for the year within the next 3 weeks, Norman. Um, so, the reason why I say that is right now the fish are probably the easy. I don't know how if I say easiest, it's not. It has been tough, but I say let's say it like this, Norman. You can catch them shallow, you can catch them mid range,
You
and
can
you can
catch them
catch them
deep,
deep.
anywhere in between. But
Yeah,
fishing's fishing. You still got to fish for them, and nothing comes easy when you're on the water. I don't care how easy the fishing is. You still have to fish.
right. So um, I've been using a like a Texas rig with a Cinco on it. Actually, the Bruiser baits. I've been using some of the Bruiser baits.
The 6-inch big stick or the 5-inch stick worm.
5 inch. Um, and then I've also have used Pro Z, and I've used Southeast Tackle. The Southeast Tackle, the Technique worm. Brian Backham made it, or he designed it. It is a great bait. Um, I've been catching quite a few fish, pretty much on a Cinco style bait. But those are the uh, three companies that I've been using the baits. I've been kind of just switching it out. There's really not one getting more hits than the other, Norman. Um, but I have noticed, like, I love fishing shallow. I've been able to catch nice bass up shallow,
Yeah.
but I've also noticed they are moving out to the ledges. Um, and I have noticed that there has been grass coming in, Norman, in between 12 to 15 feet. You can start seeing that grass coming in nice.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's just nothing but good. I mean, I want to say that this is probably the best grass that we've had in a long time coming in this early.
That's incredible. And
Um, so as long as TVA or TWRA does not come in and spray, we're going to have a heck of a year.
oh, that's awesome,
But
man.
if you really wanting to catch a big bag, book a trip with Norman or or Caleb Bell or uh,
Josh and
Josh
hey,
fishing
real
outfit.
quick shout out to Josh and from myself and Colin, a big huge. Josh is a very good buddy of ours. He also is the owner of Chattahoochee Fishing Charters.
Yeah,
If you've been wondering where Josh is, he kind of took about a 3 week layoff from his guiding, which was hard for him to do because he's pretty much booked 24/7 all the way through the whole year.
yeah,
But big shout out, congratulations to Josh and his wife. Just had their first son.
yeah.
Guys, congratulations, man! And Josh will be back on the water here pretty soon with
Yeah,
his
a week and
buddy,
a
man.
half
But
ago.
yeah, but congratulations to them guys, man. That is super awesome, Josh and his wife. And but anyway, I wanted to throw that out real quick as we're talking
Yeah.
about Josh.
Well,
But
hey,
yeah, Josh, Caleb, and myself, give us a call, and we'll definitely do our best to put you on some fish out there.
yeah, and if Caleb he did get in, he got in that accident and stuff. Somebody
Yeah.
rear-ended his boat. So he does. I talked to him yesterday, um, and he did. He actually bought Gene Fluke Master. Uh, he bought Gene's old aluminum craft.
Okay.
So he's got a new boat or a new to him boat, but it's still practically a new boat.
Yeah.
It's not even. I mean, it's probably about a year and a half, 2 years old. But
Yeah.
so uh, Caleb is going good with it. But Norman, let's talk about though kind of the baits also. Uh, Also been using a swim bait, um, but um, on the ledges, you're gonna love this. This is gonna fit right into your neck of the woods. Right now is the perfect time to for you to be out there and dragging a Carolina rig with that big
Well,
mastiff.
you don't know how much tempting you are to say, "Here you go, Colin. Finish this episode," and me walk away from this camera, and you'll hear my truck with the boat behind it peeling out of the driveway heading to Chickamauga.
Yeah. So, but and then um, and then some deep cranks off of the ledges have been doing pretty good. Uh,
Getting back to the swim bait. So tell everybody, how do you rig your swim baits? What kind of hook are you using? Are you using a
uh,
weighted hook in the belly or a
yeah,
jig
it's a
hook in the head?
weighted hook, and I also been using um, let's see if you can see. Crap. I'll take it out of the package. Um, I've been using this underspin.
That's awesome. Yeah.
This underspin is actually from uh, Lurch's Lures. His underspins. I really enjoy throwing his underspins. They seem to hold up pretty well. I also will throw uh, fishtails. They make their own underspins. Uh, I like them also. Um,
And also
but
another one I'll throw into the mix too is check out Bruiser Bait. Bruiser Bait has a underspin, and oh man, gosh, I wasn't prepared for this one, and the name is slipped my mind of what the underspin is called. But Bruiser Bait has an underspin also. Actually it's one of the only underspins that they're actually doing it with the tungsten metal
oh yeah, just
in
I remember
the
seeing
belly of the
them.
hook versus
Over there
lead.
in the place. Yeah,
Yeah, I haven't seen many underspins that's actually using tungsten other than Bruiser.
yeah.
And one of the ways an underspin works, just very similar to a spinnerbait actually, is you get that bite triggered off of bouncing off of stuff, whether you're up here bouncing it off of rocks or on Lake Fork bouncing it through trees
Yeah.
or on
I just been,
Chickamauga throwing it through brush. It's the way it bounces off stuff that triggers that bite, and that's how that tungsten works over like lead. You get that different kind of a sound when it knocks into stuff.
I
Where,
bet I bet that tungsten underspin from Bruiser will do very well with how I'm throwing the underspin. I'm putting a 2.8 Tech on it, or actually, let's see if I got some right here. Here's the belly weighted one that I'm
right?
using. I got these are actually from Driftwood, and this is Driftwood's version of the Tech.
I got you.
I really like there, and that's the ones that I've been throwing. This right here,
Good looking
uh,
setup. Now
and also
my go to on it is of course the super swimmer,
yeah,
which very similar to that. It's similar type of a bait. You know, regular swim bait has that paddle tail on it, but I actually won a tournament in Okeechobee several years back on the bruiser bait underspin, throwing it on the super swimmer as the bait that's on it, but
yeah,
and another thing with the tungsten too, what is tungsten? Tungsten is a denser type of metal versus your lead, so you get a half ounce underspin with the tungsten metal, and that weight is actually a smaller, denser size in
yeah,
stature than your regular lead underspin is going to be with the weight
exactly
basically in the belly of the hook because of the density of
right.
tungsten versus lead.
But on the underspin, that Lurch's underspin, I'm putting like a 2.8, the Driftwood, the 2.8 on there, throwing it out, letting it sink, and I'm just slow roll. I'm not picking it up. I'm just letting it just slow rolling back.
How
Back
deep are you? Yeah, how deep are you fishing that in?
do what?
How deep are you throwing it? When you let it go down, are you fishing it
I'm
deeper
like
water? Or?
when I'm throwing, it's going all the way to the bottom, but I'm normally fishing probably. I throw up to the bank out to about 12 foot, and you know, Norman, that is
That
my
yeah.
go-to depth is up to about 12 foot.
And that's the
But
cool thing with Chickamauga is typically if you use that pattern 12 months out of the year all year long, that same pattern will work.
yeah, and it will.
Just crushing it, keep your boat set about like you said about 12, 13, 14 foot of water, and typically a lot of areas you're going to be in casting distance of the bank,
Yeah,
and that pattern actually you could catch fish on that type of pattern pretty much
yeah.
12 months out of the year.
And so, but I did get the driftwood belly weighted swim hooks or swim bait hooks, the driftwood swim baits, the lurches underspin. I got it all at Jack's Bait and Tackle.
Yep.
So.
Yeah,
Uh,
shout out to Kim, Jack's
yeah,
Bait and Tackle. You're in the Chattanooga area. You must get in and check out Kim's at Jack's Bait and Tackle.
that's
She'll
funny.
definitely hook you up.
It's funny that we just did a plug for her and she just popped on.
What's up, Kim?
So hey, Kim.
But
Um,
anyway, great bait and tackle shop. Anytime you go in there, I don't care if it's your first time walking in there or your 200th time, you're going to be treated the same.
yeah,
And they treat you like family every time you walk in, always greeted with a smile. Over and beyond helpful when you walk in. So, yeah, definitely check out Jack's Bait and Tackle. Cam, they do it right there in
yeah.
Chattanooga.
So and then like if I'm fishing the ledges, I'm gonna start out, Norman, with throwing that Carolina rig.
Hmm.
And I tie up that Carolina rig just like how you told you had showed me like how you do it.
Now you're
And
talking.
so, but if you, Norman, will you tell we can you explain like how you set up your Carolina rig so everybody like even down to like the rod and stuff like that that you use.
Yep. Now, a lot of people when they're fishing Carolina rig, they use it as still keep it kind of finessey. Well, anytime I pick up a Carolina, or I don't want to say anytime, the majority of the time I pick up my Carolina rig, I am power fishing for giants. That's why I pick it up. That's the only reason I typically go to the Carolina rig is to power fish them giants. Um, but typically, I will use, starting out with the weight, 3/4 ounce flat out tungsten by Bass Edition Gear Bruiser Bait. All right, and the reason typically when I'm power fishing a Carolina rig, you very, 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 very seldom will ever see me going to anything lighter than a 3/4 ounce. Most people's like, well, that's awful heavy weight when there's no wind blowing. Well, my thing with fishing a Carolina rig is you can feel so much when you throw a heavier weight. If you downsize that weight, even if you don't have any wind blowing, and you downsize that weight really light, it's hard to stay in tune to what you're actually fishing. The heavier the weight, you can keep in contact with the bottom a lot better. I don't care how hard the wind's blowing. It could be a glass out. You keep in contact with that bottom. You keep more in tune with what's down there, what you're actually fishing. But 3/4 ounce now, when it's blowing and it starts blowing harder, and you need to beef up the weight a little bit more to kind of stay on the bottom. And this is when it starts blowing a gale. And typically, when that happens, you're usually going to have to resort to drifting with it versus trying to fight it. But when you're drifting with it, you might have to beef it up a little bit, go up to 1.5 ounces if needed. But 3/4 my go-to weight, and that's always going to be followed by the bruiser bait barrel weight, originally designed for a lightweight sea rig. But typically with the Carolina rig, the old rule of thumb, weight followed by that glass bead, followed by the swivel. What it does is clanking back and forth between as you're knocking it off of stuff on the bottom. That's one of the things that triggers the bite, plus the disturbance that the weight, the bead, and the swivel is making as it's banging around on the bottom. That's the other thing that triggers that bite. And if you do it right, it could draw a fish from 30, 40 foot away that doesn't even see it, but hears it, gets that sense, gets that vibration of it clanking around. But with that barrel weight by Bruiser, now you have tungsten against tungsten. And one thing with tungsten weight is you cannot use no longer a glass bead behind it, because with the tungsten weight, it's such a solid weight, it will crack a glass bead, and you don't want your glass bead cracking, because that's when you break off. It'll cut your line. So you never want, with the new tungsten, you don't want to use glass beads. So we're using the bruiser bait barrel weight, and that imitates that glass bead 100% spot on. And then of course your swivel, and
Now,
that clanking back and forth is what does it. But here's the kicker to, I call it the NLF, the normally fishing rig. Um,
because you're the only person that does this that I know of.
yeah. Well, anybody you see doing this is because I either told them about it, they've watched my videos, they've seen me, watched me on the water, but I I use the typical leader length that most people's going to be throwing is 18 to 20 inches. your typical leader length. My leader length on my Carolina rig or on my sea rig is always going to be a 7 foot leader. Reason behind that, and when I first started really trying to fine tune the Carolina rig, I spent a lot of time, a lot of research, fishing every which way. I'd actually go out with two rods, one rig conventional, one rigged with the 7 foot leader. And believe it or not, as I was doing that, same fish, same areas, that 7 foot leader, and you might find this hard to believe, but that 7 foot leader would catch 7 to 2, meaning 7 fish to the 7 foot versus two. Every 7 fish, you'd only be catching 2 fish on your conventional leader, and that's two rods rigged two different ways, side by side, all day long. So, and my attributes to why that works that way is you're putting that bait that much further behind that weight. So when them fish see that noise, that clanking, that disturbance at that weight, followed by that barrel weight, the tungsten barrel weight's making, draws them fish in. Then 7 foot behind that, they see that worm coming along, bounce along. That weight draws them. They see that bait coming right towards that disturbance. A lot of times when you have that bait too close to that disturbance, the disturbance, once that bait gets there, it's gonna spook them off a little bit. It's too close to where that disturbance is when they see that bait. So the two of them too close together kind of offsets each other. Where you set it back a little bit further, it's a little bit more distance from when that clanking, that noise, that disturbance is coming along, from when that bait's tracking slowly behind it, and then fish will light it up. But that's the rig. If you've never tried it, you never threw it, get out, try to throw it. And I will add one more thing to it: casting it. Once you get good at casting it, man, you could cast. The biggest question I have pertaining to that rig is how do you cast it? Because it's such a long leader. You could cast it as long as you cast any bait in your box. You just want to refrain from it buckling behind you. As long as you keep a kind of more sweeping motion, if you keep that leader stretched out all the way through your motion of your cast, you'll cast it every bit as far as anything in your box.
Yeah. So, but that right there is typically is the baits right now that I'm using. My dad's been going out there catching them on a stick bait and on a little curly tail on a Texas rig. He loves Texas rigging, but he's been tearing them up. He went out there this morning, Norman, when I was working, and he only was out there for a couple hours, and he said he caught 5 keepers. So you can't beat that.
No,
But
yeah, I told your dad earlier today. He gave me a holler, and yeah, he said his last 3 trips. And remember too, Steve's when he's not out with you, he's going fishing from the bank too.
yeah,
And that just goes to show that it doesn't matter if you're fishing from the bank, no matter where you are, go to your local farm pond. If it doesn't matter if you're fishing from the bank or fishing from a boat, you can still go out there, have fun, and catch fish. And I think Steve said his last 3 trips, he's caught multiple limits in the day, and that's
yeah,
all fishing from the bank.
yeah. So, but that's what I'm looking at. I'm going offshore. I'm looking 15 to 20 foot of water, Norman.
Yeah.
And that grass is starting to come in nice,
Oh yeah,
and about 15 foot. So,
yeah. And
but
if anybody knows a little bit about colder climate, even though we're not cold like you get up north, but we're still a colder climate here in Tennessee during the wintertime. Any grass type driven lake, all the grass, whether you hydrilla, milfoil, and Chickamauga has a little bit of both, or a lot of both, milfoil and hydrilla, kind of a mixture 50-50. But during the wintertime, when that water temperature starts dropping, it dies all the submerged vegetation off, and then as it starts growing back, it starts getting prime. And right about now, like you're saying, once that grass starts coming up off the bottom, it's nice, fresh, green, brand new grass coming up. And probably in another month, you're going to get some areas that it's just going to be off the charts. It's going to start topping out around the flats too.
yeah, but that's what I'm doing on Chickamauga, um, and oh, dealing with talking tackle and wishing I was fishing charter. Um, He's pretty much doing the same thing. He is throwing a bigger swim bait than I am, though.
Yeah.
Um, and he's throwing a when he's going out on them ledges. He said that he's throwing a Carolina rig with a big worm. He's throwing. Then he'll come in and throw something that has a little bit of vibration to it. Then he'll go to a deep diving crank, and then he'll start a little bit finessing
Yeah.
it.
And
So he's kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing. Or I guess we kind of say we're both kind of doing the same thing. He is doing a couple things other than what I'm doing. Um, so
yeah. And
that's kind of what's going on Chickamauga.
And another
So
thing, also Dylan, next time you see me on the water, come over, holler at me. I want to toss you a couple of the big nasties, which is they're when they're chewing offshore on that Carolina rig. I want to toss you a couple of those by Bruiser Bait and let you try them, see what you think. Give me some feedback on them. But the big nasty Dylan, they're a 14.25 inch, nastiest big bass, big bait worm I've ever fished. But next time you're out there and you see me, swing by. Let me toss you some in your boat so you could give them a shot.
yeah, yeah. So but Norman, you've spent a little bit more time. I've been on Nickajack here recently a couple times, but you've spent a little bit more time out on Nickajack than I have. So what is going on right now on Nickajack?
Yeah, man. Well, again, Nickajack is a current driven body of water, and when I say current driven body of water is and Nickajack's one of the only lakes or rivers, for that matter, river system or lake, but basically Nickajack's a river. For the most part, it does open up into a lake, but that pretty much I've never seen one that actually 24/7 typically is going to have some kind of moving water uh, all parts of the day. I mean, and that's usually you're going to have moving water out there. But the last now they're actually starting to generate a little bit more current flow here lately. But the last few times we've been out there, and it was really the first time in the past 2 years or 2.5, 3 years that I've been here full time that I've seen where the water that they were generating very little. I think they had one generator going all day. And typically, it doesn't matter how far down Nickajack you run, you're always going to have some good current moving. And it was to the point where when you got away from the dam, a half a mile down, you actually, if if the wind's blowing the opposite direction of the current flow, the wind's going to be offsetting the current flow. You're actually going to be drifting the opposite way the current's pushing. But with that being said, man, the you always seem to be able to catch numbers out there. Now you do need that stronger current flow to get on a good big bass bite. But with the low current we've had the last few times, we're still catching decent numbers, but we're not catching the big numbers that we're accustomed to catching. And it's kind of funny when I say that because we went out. I think the last couple of trips we've been out, we still managed throughout the day to catch 20, 24, 25 bass, and people might look at me like that's big numbers on most bodies of water. Anybody would be breakdancing on their deck if they go out every day and catch 20, 25 bass in a day, but
Yeah,
that's pretty common on Nickajack.
yeah.
Um,
Tyler Thornberry, he's on here, which I fished against him in the River Park tournament. He says
uh,
Nickajack is Nickajack. It all depends on TVA. If they're pulling water, uh, it depends on if TVA is pulling water. If they are pulling water, fish are biting. If they're not pulling water, just go home.
Exactly. Spot on right there. But the thing with Nickajack is you could always find areas to catch them. And when I say catching them when they're not, when there's no current or when the water isn't moving, I'm talking about you. Fish have to eat, but the smaller fish are so much more aggressive. It seems like they're gonna. You can usually find areas where you're gonna catch this. And when I say smaller, I'm talking 12-inch to 13 and a half inch fish. Even under largemouth size, you'll still catch largemouth, spots, and smallmouth, but they're all typically around the same size length. And one thing he is perfect, spot on, is you definitely need the. Here's the thing with Nickajack: the faster the water's moving, and I mean almost to the point where you can't control your boat, the better you're going to get on that big, giant smallmouth bite. When that water flow starts slowing down, where you get very little current, that big giant smallmouth bite just goes completely away. Now we could always go out and catch, and we'll catch 2025, but you're talking that's 2025 12 to 13-inch fish. Now it's a lot of fish, but you're just not getting the big ones out of it, just due to the fact that that current flow is such a big deal out there. But real quick, and we're not going to spend too much time on this because we got we got a lot of great topics to talk about today. But my two bet my actually my three go tos out there, of course, that bait right there, and as you can see, I typically trailer my jigs with two different baits.
Hold it by the hook.
There you go.
There you
I
go.
typically trailer my jigs with two different type of baits. This one is actually, of course, Chattown lures. This is our micro jig, and this is tipped with. Now it's a short version of the bruiser drop shot worm. Basically, when I tip the jig with a bruiser drop shot worm, I'll cut about an inch off the head to shorten it up a little bit. And that bait there also will work throwing it on a drop shot on Nickajack as well. But don't cut it off when you throw it on a drop shot. Leave the full worm on there.
And real quick, Norman, Aaron Vincent just asked, when you're throwing that Carolina rig with that 7 foot leader, what size rod are you using?
Oh, that a good question. And I meant to get into that and kind of,
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
yeah, didn't get into my rods and everything, but I throw that rig on my flipping stick. That's the rod I use. Now, one thing I like about my flipping stick, and of course, I use the Power Core custom rods. But one thing I like about the rod I use it on a 7/8 extra heavy fast tip, and that is my flipping stick. The reason being is you need when you're throwing that big bait with that long leader. First of all, you need to have the most powerful hook set you could ever generate, whether it's a small, and you never know until you set the hook if it's going to be 13. And remember, whether you're throwing a 14-inch worm or a 7-inch worm, you have just as good a chance to catch a 13-inch bass on a 14-inch worm. So you never know until you pull back on her if it's a smaller fish or one of them Chickamauga giants you always hear about. But 7 foot, my flipping stick, it's an extra heavy. It has a fast tip, which means it has a more sensitive, little bit better polybolical tip, which will help that rod load up easier, so you don't kind of get your cluck cleaned when something hits you really quick. It
Yeah.
loads up, gives you better reaction time to set up versus having a stiffer tip on it. Yeah, but that's my rod is my flipping stick. And remember, I'm power fishing with that bait. I'm going for giants, and you have to have that heavy power rod when you're fishing that style type of Carolina rig.
Exactly. And Tyler said, don't underestimate throwing a buzz bait all day for the next 2 weeks. That is very true.
Yep.
But and also a spinner bait has been. I have not thrown any spinner baits, but I've been hearing a bunch of people catching them on spinner
Yeah,
baits.
exactly. And once that hydrilla you're talking about on Chickamauga starts topping out, man, there's nothing like taking a spinner bait. Every place you find topped out areas of that hydrilla, you're gonna have typically a hard wall off that topped out pod, and off of that wall that on the edge of that topped out, you're gonna start having sparse, sporadic pods of hydrilla coming up different areas. man, take a spinner bait. Don't be afraid to throw it in that hydrilla. That's one of the things with a spinner bait is you could throw it in the thicker hydrilla and typically slow roll it through. You won't get hung up. A lot of them fish are in that thick hydrilla. Just
Or
wait
rip a
for
chatterbait.
or a chatterbait. Yeah, chatterbait and spinnerbait. When that hydrilla tops out, that's prime for throwing spinnerbaits, chatterbaits all around the topped out pods of that stuff. And even when you're in 15 foot of water and you see hydrilla on the bottom starting to come up, throwing a chatterbait, man, I've seen them fish come up from 15, 20 feet below and crush a buzzbait on the top, come up all the way from the depths below.
Yeah. All right. So what else are you throwing on Nickajack?
But the other thing I'll show you one more. It's the same bait. This is a different color, but this. The reason I show you this, I have this one tipped, and this is actually my go-to trailer on these baits, which is the McMinnow. So I usually tend to throw both trailers on it, whether it be the Bruiser drop shot worm or the McMinnow. My third go-to. This doesn't work as good all year round, but there's certain times. Right now, this bite's starting to come on a little bit stronger, and as the summer wears on, it's gonna be lights out for this bait, and basically just a simple spoon,
Yeah.
treble hook on the back side of it. Now you can work this a couple of different ways on Nickajack. Of course, I like to bank bang with it, throw it around the laydowns, throw it around the rocks. On the bank, if you find any areas where you have eddies, where you have a point coming out, where you got that current flow washing around, that makes an eddy on the back side of it for an ambush point, man, you want to be throwing this. Usually on an ambush point, when them fish are set up ready to ambush bait as it comes by, them fish are ready to eat anything that comes in their sight as it goes around where that water flow is coming around where they're sitting behind stuff. There's no bait better to throw when they're eating and ready to chew when they're ready to ambush something.
Yeah. Now, Norman, let's talk real quick of what we got going on Nickajack here tomorrow.
Yeah, man. We're gonna be out on Nickajack tomorrow. Me and Colin is going to be we're gonna be doing a bruiser challenge. And what that's going to entail is me and Colin's going to be actually fishing MLF style, weigh and release, and we're going to have a little head-to-head competition between us. Here's the kicker with what we're doing is we're only going to have actually 5 different baits in the boat with us, and all these baits actually was handpicked by Mr. Steve Dial down there in Alva, Florida at Bruiser Baits. And we're going to be actually out with these baits that he handpicked for us. And we're going to have a little head-to-head competition, MLF style tomorrow. And it's going to be all about throwing these bruiser baits and catching fish.
Yep. So that's going to be exciting. I'm excited about it. I got all my camera batteries charged up. We're ready to go.
Keep an eye out for the video, of course. We're going to be filming it tomorrow, so the video probably won't be out for another month and a half, but keep an eye out for that. We'll keep everybody posted when the video is getting closer to come out.
Yeah. But let's move on down the list here. How, like, because it's been a while since we done the chat with Norman and Colin. So if y'all have any questions for us, just feel free to ask it in the comments. We'll get to them. But we have questions that we've already that we've thought of, and so we're going to just kind of go back and forth with each other. First question I got for you, Norman, is how important is boat positioning when you're out there trying to catch some big ones?
All right. Well, anyway, when I'm out on the boat and what I like to eat during the day. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong question. I've been waiting for Jonathan. Sorry about that. No, anyway, that's an insider. We got somebody that always asks. Actually, it's Colin's brother-in-law that always has the question, "What do we like to eat when we're out on the boat?" So anyway, little inside track. Get off the beaten trail there. But anyway, boat positioning, man. Right? Was that the question, Colin?
Yep, boat positioning.
You know what? Boat positioning is probably the most important part of being able to locate bass on where you get your boat set up. And when I say boat positioning, I mean, it could be fishing the shoreline, fishing laydowns, uh, fishing ledge, dragging, drifting, fishing the river system,
A brush pile or
brush
something,
piles.
a
How
dock,
you position
whatever.
your boat is, I, I'm a firm believer, 90% of your success as a fisherman is being able to position your boat properly. And that could boil down to the little simplest things is where the sun is setting up if you're fishing shallower water. You don't realize it, but when you're fishing shallow, fish could see. If you ever notice a bass and look at where their eyes are positioned on their head, bass's eyes are towards the top of their head. Okay, bass actually look up. They don't look straight. They don't look side. They don't look down. They're constantly looking that direction. And believe it or not, boat positioning when you're fishing shallow, the sun plays a big part of that. You got to make sure where your shadow is, where the shadow of the boat is. All plays a big part of boat positioning. It could be as simple as that. When you are fishing a current-driven body of water, and we went over this a few times. Very important. Fish is always going to set up on the lee side of where that current flow is pushing, ready to ambush. When you're fishing anything on the bottom, even like we talked about fishing eddies or points that come out when you have a water flow, where you set your boat at. To be able to target them fish, you want to target them fish the same direction the fish is going to be flowing downstream properly, so then fish could ambush it. Ledge fishing is another big key on how you position your boat. Brush pile. So yeah, boat positioning is key. But let's talk a little bit about power poles when you're shallow water fishing. We'll kind of tie boat position in with power poles. Um, I have two power poles on the back of my boat, and I've had them on there now for over pretty much almost since day one that power pole was invented. And you wouldn't believe how they allow you, and they work so many different ways, from being able to position yourself so you're not blowing around, you're not moving around. You fish in a shoreline and it's blowing a little bit, and you hook a fish, or you're trying to stay off the bank, stay off the weed line. You could actually use the power poles to slow you down. Eliminates you from having to keep the boat off with your trolling motor. Eliminates blowing that prop wash up to where you're fishing, covering it with mud. When you're fishing tournaments, you can drop the power poles when you hook a fish, deal with the fish, put them in the live well, cull a fish. When you step back up on the deck ready to go again, you're not moved an inch from where you were. Before power poles, in tournaments, you hooked a fish. By the time you got done dealing with that fish, you could be 100 yards down where you were. Have to get on your big motor and motor all the way back up to continue your fishing. Now with power poles, you don't have to do that anymore. It just makes it so much simpler to boat position yourself. But yeah, man, boat positioning 100%. Very key on how you catch them, how you find them, how you target them.
Yeah. Well, Mike Lindell's on here, and he's already talking some smack. Says, Norman, you gonna go? Are you going to go light line on Colin? Old school 8-pound test line gets more bites. So I guess he's just more of us asking a question instead of talking smack. But
You know what? Yes and no. I do. There's times that I use light line and times I don't. There's times I use a leader. There's times I don't. Um, but I'm a firm believer. You hear a lot of people talk about how you have to use 8-pound test fluorocarbon when the water's crystal clear, which, sort of kind of right, but my main thing is all about presenting the bait. Now, granted, if you're fishing something slow, where where the fish have a lot of time to really study the bait, such as a worm, and you're fishing crystal clear water, yeah, I like to go down to lighter line. Now, here's the thing: and I hear people talking all the time about throwing crankbaits on 4 pound tests. As a matter of fact, Kevin Van Dam, you watch a lot of his stuff. He's throwing crankbaits on 4 and 6 pound tests.
Yeah, I throw it on 8.
I can't see myself doing that. I mean, psychologically, I'd be messed up knowing I'm throwing it, especially the price of those deep diving 25+ foot crankbaits nowadays, where you're gonna dish out a $20 bill every day, all day long. But typically my line size when I'm having to throw it on fluorocarbon or lighten the line is typically going to be 10 pound. That's about what I go down to. My spinning reel when we're throwing our jigs, when I'm throwing really light tackle, I'll throw 10 pound fluoro. And I do something a little bit different than a lot of people. Most people, when they're throwing lighter fluoro on a spinner reel, they throw like your 20 pound braid off the reel. They don't. They put a fluoro leader on. I go straight fluoro right off my reel. Now, I've had people ask me all the time, doesn't it twist up on you? Well, yes and no. If you throw in heavier fluoro, like 15, 16, 17 pound fluoro on a spinning reel, it doesn't matter what direction you spool it up on. It's going to tend to want to buckle off the spool if you get a slack on that spool. But typically 10, 12 pound test fluorocarbon, typically it will not buckle. It won't want to explode off the spool on you. You can usually keep it pretty good on your spinning spool. I tend to, now the only time I actually will go braid with a fluoro leader is if I'm fishing around a lot of wood, something like that, but you need to lighten it up because it's clear type conditions where I need that no stretch, that sensitivity you're going to get with the braid for the bite. And the braid will give it a little bit more durability when you're pulling it against wood and stuff like that, where it's not gonna chafe as bad as like your fluoro would.
Yeah. Well, we're already at 52 minutes, brother.
Holy cow! What was I telling you before about how time flies, man?
Yeah.
We haven't even started.
No, we hadn't even really got into the questions yet.
You're talking too much, Colin.
What do you? You got a question?
I don't have a question. You have a question? You
do have a question.
I do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I do. All right, thanks. You're throwing the next topic to me. I see what's going on here. All right, let's talk real quick a little bit about A rigs. There's a big debate on the pro level on the A rigs. The A rigs actually, and when I say A rigs, I'm talking about Alabama rig. Both the A rig or the Alabama rig on both tours, the Elite Series and the Bass Pro Tour, and a lot of affiliated tournaments with MLF. I believe BFLs and the Toyota Series don't allow them anymore. Is the A-Rig, and there's a big debate on that. Everybody has their own opinion. A real quick backstory on A-Rig. It first came onto the scene in 2011 as far as bass fishing, but a lot of people don't realize the A-Rig's been around since the 1980s. It's been being used in saltwater and for stripers, formerly known as umbrella rig. So it's been around for a while. Paul Elias back in 2011 won a FLW Tour event with the A-Rig. And as soon as he won that event, it just flew. Now all of a sudden, first it got Mann's Bait Company started making them after that event. Of course, Paul Elias at that time was sponsored by Mann's Bait Company. And then it just took off where everybody and their brother was making knockoffs of it. But it took off quick. But let's talk a little bit about what's your opinion, Colin. Everybody has their own opinion.
I definitely do have an opinion on this. But everybody knows opinions are like buttholes. Everybody has one, right?
Oh yeah, everybody's entitled to their own opinion too, and not going to say you're right or you're wrong. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody's right in my book, but everybody has their own opinion.
My thing is, I think they should bring it back because an A rig has its time and place. It's not like somebody's going to go and crush fish every tournament on an A rig. And so, but then people will say, yeah, that's true. But what about if you got five hooks on it, which some states have it to where you can do five? Tennessee has three. There's some states up north that you can only have one. I think it's Michigan. You can only have one hook. But people say, what about the other hooks punching holes into the fish when you're catching them, right, Norman?
Oh yeah.
But my thinking on it is there really any difference to have if let's just say you even have the five on there? Is there any difference to have four other hooks coming around, possibly hooking the fish, than having a jerkbait that's got three treble hooks on it that has nine hook points on it?
Oh, exactly. And that's a good point right there. But here's the thing. Think about this for a minute. What's the definition of fishing? What's the description of fishing?
Yeah.
The definition of fishing is a person getting out on a lake, on a pond, whether you be from the bank or from a boat, and your main goal or your main purpose is trying to trick whatever's out there into thinking
Yeah.
what you're throwing or what you're fishing is a food that they're eating, right? That's the definition of fishing, is trying to trick a fish into biting, thinking it's a real living bait that they want to eat.
Yeah.
So, and what is the A rig? The A rig is basically, it originally was designed for freshwater. Well, when it was designed in the early '80s for saltwater, it was designed for the same reason, to mimic a pod of bait fish running. And when it was first designed, the guy that first designed it for saltwater, where it came from was he was watching a video on TV of tuna, big tuna chasing pods of mackerel to eat them. And that's where he got the brainstorm to try to design a bait that looked just like a pod of bait fish running from another predator.
Yeah.
And in my book, that A rig, if you could get them fish to eat that A rig, like you can, and there's been many cases where I've seen people catching two, three. I've even seen one time somebody caught four fish on one rig, on four different hooks. If you could trick the fish, if you could trick the fish with that A rig, you've done your job of what a fisherman is supposed to be doing, tricking fish. Think about it for a minute. You got five or three, in some cases, swim baits coming through the water, all hooked to a coat hanger. Basically, they're hooked to five big pieces of metal. And if you could trick a fish to eat that, you've done your job for the day. But my other thought behind that too is, I think it should make a comeback on the pro circuits, because if you're manning, I've threw it, and I started throwing it thinking I was going to throw it for a couple hours. I put that son bitch away in about 1 minute. If you're man enough to chunk that thing for 8 hours in a
Well, I
day,
got
man, more power to you. And if you do well on it, and if you win $100,000 tournament, man, my hat's off to you. But I've tried to throw that thing, and that's hard to throw for half an hour, more or less than 8 hours in a day.
yeah. Yeah. So, well, Norman, a couple of months ago, we were able to be a part of the media team for BASS at the Classic. This next question kind of goes kind of towards that. Um, do you think that the elites should, if you win an elite series tournament, do you think that should be an automatic bid into the Classic?
That's actually a pretty darn good question. If you look at a lot of sports today, and let's throw one out there, NASCAR racing. All right, if you win a NASCAR race throughout the regular season, it locks you into the playoffs. Um, and what that does with NASCAR is it makes them try to at least win a race throughout the year, where points still matter. Points still matter to make it. If you don't happen to get lucky enough to win one, but if you win one, it automatically locks you in. Uh, if they ever done that, where winning an elite series automatically locks you into the classic, they'd have to change quite a bit around as far as the point system. They'd have to, if you made it in points, but you also won one, then your spot would actually be pushed back another spot in the points. So there would be a lot of attributes that would have to be worked out. But yeah, I think that'd be a pretty good rule if you win one, because that gives that incentive to actually get out. And you hear a lot in pro fishing today of points, which is right, because everybody's main goal is to make the classic at the end of the year. That's what everybody's dream, everybody's goal is. But everybody knows that when a pro angler goes into the beginning of the year, they know they're never going to say it, because they can't say it. They have to have that confidence persona. But every angler, I don't care if they're the best angler in the world or if they're ranked 75th on tour, everybody that goes into the season knows, the percentage rate of them actually winning one that year is pretty slim. Because you got to say there's 9 tournaments in the season, so there's only going to be 9 guys that win it out of 100 anglers. Okay, so yeah, my feeling is I would like that if you win an Elite Series event, that would automatically qualify them for the Classic. I think that'd be pretty good. I think it'd be a pretty cool.
It gives them more to fight for.
Huh?
It gives them more to fight for.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. That kind of gets back to my point about points. Everybody's trying to get the points to make the Classic, but it would first of all, I think it'd put on a better TV show, because the guys that make the final day in the top 10, it'd make a lot of people, the old saying, swing for the fences. Well, I think if you were 10th place going into Championship Sunday, and you knew you might be 10 pounds off the lead, you might see more people swinging for the fences to try to get that win, knowing they already have the points coming in the top 10, so they already have the points that event. Now you might see more of them actually that make the top 10 swinging for the fences, which would make it better for TV, to be able to watch the show, because it'd put a little bit of a thrill if you get the top 2 or the bottom 2 or 3 out of the top 10 start swinging for the fences and just doing something they wouldn't normally do to try to win the event, versus thinking they could just improve their spot 1 or 2 places going into the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, that's what I would like to see that. Because then, because there's only 9 tournaments, so that's really only guaranteeing. You might have, like Brandon Polnick or something like that, or Jason Christie or Hackney or whatever. You've seen where they made a little run and they've won a couple of them, but I still think that, you're going to have over, what is it? They got 50 anglers in the Classic. And so, what's 9? Most of the time, if you win a tournament anyways, the likelihood of you going to the Classic is going to be pretty good anyways.
Yeah. And I guarantee, too, it might not change the way you approach the tournament going into days 1, 2, and even probably day 3. But where it's going to change the way you fish is if you make the championship Sunday, go into that final 10. I
Exactly.
guarantee
Yeah.
that'll change the way they fish, change the way they approach the day, especially if they're in 10th, ninth, 8th, or 7th place where they still have that outside chance. Where you got to think about it this way too is if they're in 10th, 7th, 8th, ninth place, they still have a great points day to still get the points if they don't win. But now they're in position to try to swing for the fences, knowing if they pull off a miracle, they'll automatically be locked in.
Yeah. So I uh, I agree with you on that one, brother.
Yeah, and let's talk now. Being that we're talking about the elites, let's bring up another. This is an arguable also, and I know what my stance is on it.
And y'all can put y'all's feeling in the comments too, and we'll
Yeah,
read
y'all
them.
let us know what you feel about what we're talking about as well, man. Let us know your opinions, and again, no opinion is wrong. Everybody has their own opinion, and
Unless
I
it's
don't think there's
against
any
us,
wrong
right?
opinion out there. That's what makes opinions so great. They're not wrong; they're just opinions.
Right.
Um, let's stay on the elites real quick. And this is also on the Bass Pro Tour too. Um, Being able to use landing nets. Now the elites they don't use landing nets or the Bass. Now the Bass Pro Tour. Um, Very understandable why they don't because the Bass Pro Tour that's how that tour first involved with MLF back in the day before MLF even was they were fishing what was known at first before MLF bought or I don't want to say bought or took over FLW, um, and that's how it first got generated was fish care. They wanted to have an event where it was more about not as much about catching the fish and putting the fish in the boat and competing, but more so of how the anglers really take care of the fish, whether they're fishing a 5 fish event or like the MLF does now, where they're weighing and releasing. So using a net with the Bass Pro Tour might be a little bit more difficult because then you got fish going in the net. It'll kind of take away from the letting the fish hit the carpet rule. So I could understand a little bit with the Bass Pro Tour why it might never ever go to landing nets just because of the way that tournament's generated, as far as really promoting the care of the fish when they catch them. But the Elite Series, and I know my feeling on it. What do you feel about nets on the Elite Series?
Nah.
Absolutely not.
I think, and this is just my opinion, is there anything greater when you're watching the lives? Is there anything greater to see somebody do a hook set and know that they got a big one, right? They get it up to the boat. Is there anything greater than seeing them do the football grab on one of them big ones and just have it like in a headlock kind of deal?
Yeah,
That's the best thing. I mean, that's the greatest thing on TV, I think. I mean,
exactly, man.
uh, and it's making the angler a better angler. I mean, because anybody can go and net a fish, um, in which bass and even uh, the Bass Pro Tour and stuff like that, when they have their stuff on TV, it's all about a visual effect. And so, one, if you're netting a fish, you cannot see really how big that fish is in the net until they pull it out. But then if they're not using a net and they either lip it or they do the football grab, you're seeing that fish coming up out of the water. That there's nothing. I think that's the best thing that they have. I mean, with doing that, that's just my opinion. Again,
Yeah. And I'm kind of right there with you on that one, man. Um, as far as making them better fishermen, spot on, absolutely 100%. If an angler knows they have the liberty of being able to net a fish, it's really going to change the way they approach, catching a fish.
Right. And I
That's
guarantee you, if you was to ask, like, because like the FLW, they allowed. You remember, like back in the FLW, they allowed you to net them,
yeah,
and
FLW.
the anglers that came from FLW to BASS, if you ask them what's the hardest transition to do, I guarantee you, I won't say all of them, but there's a good portion of them that's going to say having to grab that bass at the boat.
Exactly, and I've actually talked to Scott Martin on that subject, and he actually told me when he jumped over from the FLW tour to the elites that was his hardest challenge, was having to even remember when he got the fish up the first couple events that there's no net laying down there that he has the liberty of picking up. But yeah, it changes the way they approach catching a fish.
Yeah.
If they know they have a liberty of having a net right there, there'd be more of a percentage of guys just trying to horse into the boat knowing they could dip them. Where, it makes it better for TV as well, as far as making the show or making the television show, because whether they're power fishing, even power fishing, it's going to make them try to keep that fish on a little bit longer, and not horse them as much, because you have more liberty to horse a fish when you know you can net her, and take that chance. You're not going to rip that hook out of her knowing you can get her in and get her up with a dip net, versus getting her to the boat, and the next thing you know that fish wants to take a dive. Oh my goodness, and you could just see the pressure on these anglers when they have that 5 pound fish at the side of the boat, and all of a sudden they get a new life, and you could almost read how they are thinking when that fish goes down, like, oh my goodness, please, no, 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 and then when they get them up, and it's a different kind of excitement when the fishermen get them in the boat after being able to either lip them or cradle them, versus when they're able to dip them. You see, since they can't net the fish, man. When that angler gets that 5 pound fish in the boat under his arms, I guarantee you it's a different excitement that you see coming out of that angler versus if they just had him in a landing net, and it makes for better TV too at the same time.
Exactly. So, next question, Norman, um, and to the viewers and stuff. If you take the top 10, excuse me, anglers from the elites and the top 10 anglers from the Bass Pro Tour, how do you think that's going to come out?
Oh man,
Because that's
that
going to show, really, I mean, at that time, it's going to show the best of the best.
that's a tough one, and as much as, man, that could you imagine how many viewers and the ratings that television show would have if they actually
But they
had
used to do that, though,
top
right?
10 against top, not with the Bass Pro Tour and elites. And here a little backstory about the Bass Pro Tour and elites. When MLF kind of took over what formerly was known as FLW, um, the Bass Pro Tour was by invitation only.
Right.
And all of or I don't want to say all, the majority of your household big names that was formerly on the Elite Series, was invited to come fish the Bass Pro Tour, which the Bass Pro Tour is the top pro level on MLF Series now. But there has been a little bit of dissension between MLF and BASS because of that, where they drew a lot of the big names. And at first, they were afraid that they were going to lose a lot of their fan base, a lot of their ratings, especially when it came time for the Classic, because all the big names now, that jumped the ship over to the Bass Pro Tour was no longer there, no longer competing in the Classic. Well, with that being said, that never happened, man. Bass is up doing as good, if not better, than it's
I mean,
ever.
they broke the record here.
The series just broke the record in Knoxville for the amount of people they had at the Classic. But getting back to the question, man, that'll be a tough one. Now, one thing I will say, and if you kind of see me kind of beating my way around the main top of the question, I probably am because I got friends on both sides that so I'm kind of trying to beat around the main part of this question. But another side story to that question too is now you're seeing a lot of the guys like Gerald Swindell, and there's as a matter of fact. The Bassmaster Classic winner a couple years ago. The reason that Jason Christie left the Bass Pro Tour and requalified to come back to the elites wasn't because he wanted to come back and fish the elites, is because he never won the tournament that he dreamed of winning as a kid, which is a Bassmaster Classic. So now, 4 or 5 years removed from when this all happened, now you're starting to see a few of the anglers that made the jump over to the Bass Pro Tour starting to try to trickle back. And another good name is Bobby Lane. Or Iconelli did the same thing. His dream growing up in New Jersey was to be a part and win, which he did, the Bassmaster Classic. A lot of these guys, when they jumped over to the Bass Pro Tour, really missed that one tournament of the year. But another good name is Bobby Lane.
Yeah.
He's going through the ranks of the Opens this year, so he could requalify. And here's another thing too: these guys that are actually coming back to the elites, and Bobby Lane is a good.
He'll be back on it next year.
Yeah, Bobby Lane's a good example of this. The guys that jumped over to the Bass Pro Tour and now are starting to want to come back to the elites because of the main reason because of the Bassmaster Classic. That's what they always wanted to fish as a kid. They can't fish it no more. They're starting to want to come back. Bobby Lane's a good example. Bobby's going through the ranks of the Opens this year to requalify. So it doesn't matter if your name is Bobby Lane or Kevin Van Dam. Now I know Kevin Van Dam's retiring this year, and congratulations to Kevin, man. He's one of a kind. Arguably the best angler in the history of bass fishing. But another good example is if Kevin Van Dam decided, which he never did or never probably would, now he's retiring, but and throw out his name, if he decided he wanted to come back and fish the elites again after jumping over to the MLF, he would not be, I don't care what his name is or who he is, he wouldn't be able to go right back to the elites without going through the Opens first to requalify to fish the elites again through the Opens. So you got a lot of guys coming back, but I guess you're going to put me right back to that question that I don't really want to answer because that'll be a tough one. But
Well,
you got
I'm
to
gonna say this. I mean, it's not really how it's going to wind up because you could have the same 20 people or 20 guys out on, let's say, Chickamauga, and it could turn out one way, but then you turn around and put them like on St. Clair, it's going to turn out another way. You're going to put them out on Rayburn, it could turn out another. There's really no definite answer of what really is going to happen. I guess the question that I was trying to ask is like, do you think that they should bring the best of the best from each one and do like an all-star game? Every sport has an all-star game except for bass.
me,
So
me personally, I would love it. I would eat that up, and it would make one hell of a television show. I think everybody would be waiting to watch that. Just like you said, the best of the best from both leagues, and have an overall winner, top 10 versus a top 10. But unfortunately, because of what I just said, I don't think it's ever going to happen because of how things went down with BASS and MLF when it first went. When everybody first started, jumping over,
I
crossing
think
back
that's
and
going
forth.
to be water under the bridge.
But I mean, yeah, but you would hope one day there's water under the bridge, and here's the thing too: the anglers doesn't even care. I mean, they don't think about it. It's water under the bridge to them. The anglers have no issue with either, but the issue lies with the upper directors, upper management of both leagues is where that kind of that feud is boiling at. So it's really not, the anglers really don't give a darn one way or the other about they. I mean, there's friends on both sides still to
Yeah.
this day between. So it's not really anglers that have that little beef with each other, but it's more so of tour versus tour.
Yeah.
But I would love it, man. That would
I think
that would be insane.
right, and I mean to see like Wheeler, Michael Neal, uh, you know, DC, Adrian, and then like I mean, and another one, even a guy that's somewhat local to us. I mean, Ott Defoe. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd love to see Ott Defoe to come back and hold that classic trophy again.
Yeah,
So,
no doubt, man, no
uh,
doubt.
but to see them compete against like Jason Christie, Brandon Polinick, I mean, and even like Patrick Walters. I mean, that which we know we got something going on with Patrick, but my opinion on Patrick, since I just brought it up, Patrick is the most underrated angler out there right now.
Yeah, and one thing about Patrick is there's a lot of guys out there that are very good with their electronic equipment, forward facing sonar, whatever they have on the front of their boat or their console. There is hands down no better angler at being able to target than fish by using his electronics and casting to what he sees there versus there than Patrick Walters. I mean, he is the, and that's my opinion, my in my books, the best at being able to use his electronics and use them correctly and be able to win tournaments with his electronics, hands down.
John Pate's on here. What's up, John? And
What's going on, John?
he says each organization has a chain of command to in their events to work their way to the top like any other major trail. Exactly. But we're just wanting to be able to have top 10 from BASS and the elites go against
Yeah.
the top 10 in the Bass Pro Tour. That would be a show to where I would, I mean, how many people, that might even get more people coming to that event than even what the last classic did.
Yeah, that would be epic, man. I would go. I
Yeah.
mean, I would drive to. I would make a drive across the United States if I had to see that, because that would be one tournament that you would want to go to,
Yeah,
and
for
just to
sure.
see how it went down. I mean, could you imagine the best of the best fishing head to head against the best of the best? And to make it even more epic, how about the top 10 from each division? uh, and the way they would fish it is an elimination head to head. You put two, fish the top 10, all fish the same day, but you're putting an angler against angler, and
Really,
so
it's almost like a team.
you got 10 anglers on each side, or the number one ranked on both sides fishing head to head. Okay, and each angler would eliminate the other at the end of the day. So you're going to break it down kind of like in a bracket system. So you're actually getting head to head competition between two anglers, one from each side, but all 20 anglers is on the water at the same time. But you're fishing head to head style.
I'm down with
So
it.
you'll get down to five, then you'll get down to three, and then the final day will be the final round. Two anglers head to head.
Yeah. So I'm down for it. I'd like to see an all star game or an all star fish off. Um, he says if you John Pate says if you really want to have an interesting tournament, have them fish the same lake and take away the electronics and see which one comes out on top. The one which one comes can come out on top is going to be the real fisherman. That's true. You remember we talked about that here in one of our first episodes
Yep.
about taking off, even just putting on, going back and putting the flasher. If they just had the flasher, that's it.
Yep.
That would be, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll be down for that too.
We talked about it, basically tournament getting back to your roots event.
Yeah,
All of us started out when we came up as kids. We didn't have all this $2,000-3,000 units sitting at our disposal,
nah,
and most of us still don't.
nah.
You know, so, so yeah,
I about called Matt Robson. He just got
he's got a
new
brand new.
units put on his boat, and I about called him up, said, "Hey, can I have them other ones?"
Oh yeah, yeah. He just got a new one. I think his one console unit went out, so he had
Yeah,
no choice. But yeah, he just installed a new unit.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, that would be pretty cool. A head to head, getting back to your roots tournament. You're not the only electronics you'd be allowed to use is your regular basic sonar.
yeah.
No GPS. If you can't find your way back, we'll come looking for you. But yeah, that would be cool. Getting back to your roots
Give him the
and
old paper maps.
yeah, they're old paper maps that nobody uses. I got
Triangulate your points.
I got a whole file cabinet of paper maps, and I don't think they came out of that file cabinet the last 8 years. Now that I have my electronics, I don't think I've looked at one. I could remember sitting back at the hotel years ago with that paper map laid out on the table the night before, a practice day, plotting out all my areas on that paper map, man. Thinking back about that, I'm like, damn, them were the days. Now I catch myself sitting in the mosquitoes the night before the tournament with my big GPS screen up, trying to
Yeah,
plot out what I'm gonna be doing next day. Back in the day, I used to be able to sit back in the hotel room.
yeah. You can tell when my buddies are on here. My buddy Rusty said, "What's the price for ribeyes?"
I
So,
don't know,
uh,
but it sure sounds good.
yeah, yeah. So, Norman, we got to get you over here, you and Tanya, and we'll grill out.
Yeah,
So,
man. Yeah,
speaking of steaks and stuff, but
Brick, breaking that new place you're at, man. Come over,
yeah,
have a little housewarming party.
yeah, we've been here almost an hour and a half, Norman. So, let's kind of start wrapping this thing up. Last question, which it's the last question we've asked everybody that has come on here. Um, but we've never asked each other this question. Um, if you could have one person on your boat for one day that is living or have passed, who would it be, and why would you want them on your boat?
You know what? I'm gonna go a little bit off the rocker here from what most people, talk about. Back in the day, uh, it's not no, it's not hidden. I'm a big Buccaneers fan today. Of course,
Very
living in Florida all my life, now and in Tennessee. But there's one thing you could take the boy out of Florida, but you can't take the Florida out of the boy. I'll never change my views on the Buccaneers. But here's the thing: back when I was growing up, I was a huge. I never been even near California, but I was a big. I don't necessarily want to say I was a big San Francisco fan, which I was. I was more or less of a big Joe Montana fan. I loved the way he played the game. I loved. Of course, he was arguably. I mean, not arguably at that time. Arguably today, but not at that time. At that time, he was the best in the world.
yeah,
But I just loved the way he carried himself on the field, off the field. He was a class act all the way around. But my answer to that was, man, I would love to be out on the boat for a day of fishing with Joe Montana. I mean,
yeah,
he back in the '80s when I was growing up in high school, he was my man. I love Joe Montana. Of course, look at me. I never played football. That's one thing I used to have. I used to brought the permission slip home to my mom and dad, and luckily I wanted to play in the worst way. My mom and dad had kind of an idea. They didn't want me to play because I mean I'm 110 pounds now soaking wet, and I was 120 pounds back then soaking wet. So yeah, there's no way. But I was a big Joe Montana fan.
yeah. So, I've got two answers to this. One, I'm going to go on the pro side. I would like to have Bill Dance.
Good answer.
Um, just one to be able to talk to him out on the water because there's no greater or better way to find out what somebody's thinking when they're fishing than being out on the boat with them. So I think I would love to have Bill Dance on there.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we can make that happen.
Exactly, man. One thing about Bill Dance too is uh, he is going today just every bit as strong as he was 25, 30 years ago, dude. I
Yeah.
mean, every time I've seen Bill Dance today, and you met him for the first time last year at ICAST.
Now
Uh,
I've met him before. I
he just lost Colin. For the elites next year. So, anyway, we're looking forward to that episode. And there he is back. I just closed it out for us, buddy. We lost you there for a minute.
oh, I lost you,
Yep.
but
Well, I lost you. You disappeared, or did I
you dis
disappear?
yeah you disappeared on my end too.
Well, anyway, once we watch this back, we'll see who disappeared who.
Yeah,
As of this point, I just closed it
we
out.
both
I
on
told
the
him,
yeah on the Facebook we both disappeared. You went first, and I went, and then you stayed frozen, and
uh,
then I came
well,
back.
I must have just closed the podcast out maybe to nobody then. So let's try that again. I was just telling everybody about our next week's episode.
Yeah. So, but to go back to the final question, Bill Dance. Just because I want to pick his brain, I want to find out the knowledge. I'm always trying to learn. Even like Norman can tell you, we bounce stuff off of each other just for the knowledge. We love learning how different things of fishing. Um, if Norman catches something, and I'll ask Norman, hey, what did
We lost Colin again. Colin left the building again. I don't know if you can hear you seeing Colin right now. Anyway. There he is.
there?
We
I
got
don't
Colin
know.
back in the building. Either Colin's back in the building or I'm back in the building.
Yeah. We're back on here. Let's end this real quick. My last one. I want to go back out on the boat with my granddaddy. That was who I first got out on the boat with. I've got so many fishing memories. He is now passed. Would love to get out on the boat with him.
Oh
But
yeah.
But Norman, hey, real quick before it loses signal again, what what do we got coming on next week?
We're gonna make this real quick before we lose one of us. We don't know who's going away, but one of us is going away because of the signal we have going on right now. We must have some thunderstorms in the area. Okay, here it is. Next episode, next Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't miss it. Must watch episode. We will have
There we go again.